I'm doing this little video just to show a little bit about a sanding jig I made. I'm not really sure if you call it a jig, but anyway, I was building some offering envelope holders for our church. As you can see here, I think there's between 60 and 70 of them, and I've got a few more that aren't shown in this picture. The whole idea was that you'd be able to put a couple of pencils in there and have the offering envelopes stored in there also. We had tried to do like a little paper envelope thing like you buy at Office Depot, and they had sticky on the back, when we put those on there, and they tore up so quickly and they didn't stick. We tried stapling them. It just really didn't have any luck. Again, we don't have wooden pews. We simply have cloth pews. So it's kind of different adding wooden holders on the back of them, but we think it's going to work. It's definitely got to look better than the little wooden holders from Home Depot. So I made these, and this is really not the point of the video is to talk about these. It's simply to talk about how I was able to sand them and finish them a little bit. So I looked at sanding these. I have two options. Personally, I have a DeWalt palm sander that I've had for, I don't know, probably 15 years. Been a great sander. And I have a rigid belt sander. Neither one of those really give me a good option to look at sanding something for this number of units. So I could obviously, what I tried to do on the first couple I did is I held the holder in one hand, held the sander in the other, and kind of did it that way, and was able to spin the piece. It really clunky. Really started hurting my hands after a while because of the amount of force I had to hold each of the pieces with, especially with the sander. So I looked at options and thought about, well, I could always take each one of the pieces I made, put them in a clamp, and sand it that way, and that would work, but the amount of time that would take sounded a little excessive. I'm sanding all four edges, the top, the bottom, left and right side, and I'm also sanding the front. I've already sanded the curved parts. And actually, kind of a little trick I did there is I took sandpaper and wrapped it around a drumstick and used that to sand the curved parts, and it worked pretty well. But anyway, back to making this jig. I decided I didn't want to go through the amount of time it would take, because if I clamped a piece, I'm going to sand the top, I've got to clamp the piece in, turn the sander on, sand the top. Now turn the sander off, put it down, loosen the clamp, turn it, 40 or 90 degrees, put it back in the clamp, turn the sander on, sand that side, stop. Each piece would have taken me, numerous turning the sanders on, turning the sander off, turning it, reclamping. And I thought there has to be a better option. So I looked at a way of trying to turn my palm sander into like a tabletop sander. So what I did, I went and looked at a few different hole saws. I've got quite a few different hole saw sizes. And I tried to find one that would pretty much match the little round part of my palm sander. You can see in this picture there is a round part kind of below where the handle and the power switch are. And it's thick enough that I could definitely put a board around it. So I found a hole saw that was about the right size. You can't really tell from this picture, but the hole saw is just a hair too little. And you could tell that when holding it in front of it, because if you look just right, you can't see it in this picture, but you could see yellow on both sides of the hole saw itself. So I knew I would have a little bit too small of a hole, but it actually worked out really well in that it held the sander very snug and didn't, because I was afraid I was going to have to go back and add some, a piece of rubber or a piece of foam or something to try to keep it from vibrating too much, but it really was held very tight in there. I didn't have a problem. So I went ahead and took just a small piece of scrap wood I had, put a hole in it with the hole saw. And then I went ahead and took this board after I had the hole in it and cut it in half right down the middle of the hole with my miter saw. And then I was able to kind of squeeze the board together around that hole. And it's kind of hard to see in this picture. see it here. I put it around the hole in the sander. So part of the sander sticking out on one side, the part with the power cord and the on and off switch, and the other side with the clamps to hold the paper and the sander itself are on here, on this side. So I took that, it looked pretty good, but I knew I had to secure it a little bit. So I had a couple of pieces of scrap 2x4, and I went ahead and screwed this in and got it nice and tight. So now when I was ready to use it, all I had to do is go out, grab a couple of sawhorses, and I clamped my jig, if you call it a jig, onto the sawhorses to hold it in place. And then I simply turned it on, and I was able to, of course I was using both hands to to hold the piece, but I was able to hold it and kind of move it across a little bit back and forth for each side that I wanted to sand. And I really went down to probably less than a minute per piece, and that was actually spending quite a bit of time sanding. Most of the time was sanding, because it would literally, I would just reach down, grab a piece, hold it for a minute on one side, kind of move it back and forth a little bit, turn it, hold it, turn it, and then I would simply put it in the stack of pieces that had already been done and just keep going down the line. So I was able to go through, I think it was around 70 of these in a little less than an hour. And I can't imagine the amount of time it would have taken had I tried to do the same work with just one clamp and or a vise or whatever, and trying to hold each piece and then sand it. So hopefully this will help you in some project you're working on, and you could do the same thing. I'm definitely going to go ahead and keep this jig around. I'll unscrew the screws there, take my sander out, and then put it back together and just store it with some of my other jigs. It's definitely not pretty looking, but it does the job, and that's all I really cared about. Anyway, I'd love to hear any comments if you made something similar, or love to see some pictures, or if you just think it's terrible, you can send me a comment on that too. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.